Good evening, everyone. My name is Laura Schifrin, and I'm calling the meeting to order of the Planning Board of December 23rd, 2024. Could I have a roll call vote, a roll call of those present?
Carol Hoffs is present.
Andrew Shepard, present.
And Laura Schifrin, present. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thank you to all of our veterans and all of our emergency response people, as well as everybody who's serving us today. The meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the town YouTube channel. Is there anyone else here or online that's recording the meeting? Seeing none. Okay. Chairman's additions, deletions. I'd like to read a statement for you. Due to a staffing shortage in the land use office and the holidays fast approaching, we requested an extension from the applicant of One Depot Street extension until January 6th to file the decision. The extension allows for town staff to write and review the decision received by the town council and have planning board members sign the decision during this busy holiday season. The appeal period will begin at the filing of the decision on or before January 6th. Okay, was there, so that's a point of information, and under basically what's my additions and deletions this evening. I do not believe we're going to do minutes this evening. Correct, Beth? That's going to be moved.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. And so we are now going into the work session. And Beth, could you share, I guess we'll start which should we start with, Adam, you or Mr. Doyle, since he's made the changes after your discussion with us, and how would you like to handle this?
Well, I don't know that it matters. We had three bylaws that we've been discussing. One I don't think requires any real further discussion tonight, and that's the age restricted development bylaw. Nothing has really changed since the version that the board last reviewed, but the other two bylaws, the accessory apartments in the residential district and the site plan review for accessory apartments, both were circulated a couple of weeks ago. I reviewed and had some comments on those. I appeared at and I know you're aware of this, Madam Chair, but the other members may not be. I appeared at a select board meeting about a week ago, and I suggested that it would be beneficial to have another meeting of the planning board to review my comments, which Mr. Boyle has since reviewed and made some adjustments to reflect the suggestions I made. But there are still some items that require feedback from the planning board, matters of discretion that really are not legal issues. They're issues I flagged, but based upon my review and then based upon Mr. Boyle's review, we kind of want to throw those issues back to the planning board to get your feedback on what you intend, the kind of language you're comfortable with, so we can get these into closer to final form before you have your official public hearing on January 9th. So I don't know that it matters which order we review those two other bylaws. That's up to you, Lori.
I think it would make this is Joseph Boyle, MRPC. I think it would make the most sense to start with the ADU bylaw, and if we can look at the version with Adam's comments, and then and then the updated version I sent to you. I will discuss what I did in there, comment by comment.
Okay, so Beth, can you screen share those documents so that anybody who's watching this can see it, or who doesn't have copies of it? Also,
Could you review which ones, Adams or Mr. Boyle's?
Mr. Boyle's.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Oh,
And-
Laurie, just so
Yeah.
you know, Patrick joined us.
Oh, good. Welcome, Patrick, for the record. Is there anybody else? I should look at that. Participant wise.
There's nobody else in attendance, Lori.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay.
Did I not?
It's circulating.
Once you talk, it'll
okay.
recognize you.
So
Okay.
this is the one that was done after Adams and after Mr. Boyle reviewed what your comments were, he made changes. So we're looking at the final changes of the document, right?
Right.
Thank you.
But this is not the right one. This is the site plan review. We're looking for the one that's called accessory dwelling units in
Oh,
residential districts.
ADU.
Okay.
Beth,
All right. Mhm.
All right. So while that's coming up, Adam's first comment was,
And I don't know, Joe, if it would short circuit. I don't know that we need to walk through all of my comments if you
no, not all
if
of
you've
them, but the
addressed
ones
them
that are
already.
important.
thank you.
Yeah.
Just,
If I may, this file is named ADU Site Plan Approval Amendment. That's not what we're looking for?
No, it's the file that is going to be named ATM warrant accessory dwelling
Yeah.
units.
All right. ATM warrant.
so Adam's first comment was about consistently using accessory dwelling units in place of accessory apartments. And I have gone through and done that consistently. So hopefully I caught it everywhere, but I want to do that because that will also help clarify in everybody's mind what's new language versus what's old language, because the old one uses accessory apartments. Now everything new will use accessory dwelling units. All right, moving down. The first substantive comment. All right, we move to section B.
So I just want to make sure we're all looking at the same document, because this document that's being screen shared is not the correct version. This is still a red line version. We're looking for a clean version that has some red text. So this is the document that was sent to you on Thursday afternoon at I think 4:18 p.m. by Mr. Boyle.
Mhm.
It's not
Yeah.
it's not what you've got up on the screen.
Okay. All right. So let's see. All right. Let me go back right to my email.
Are you sure that wasn't the right document, but in review mode, and she just needed to turn off the
Yeah.
markup?
No,
Oh, you
that's the
have
older red line
computers.
version.
Okay.
I was gonna say there's a printout over there.
Because you
I
accepted
don't
the
know.
red
I have these two that I took from Joe's email and basically put them right into the folders. These were taken right from his email. So, yeah, this is what Joe sent, the last one I got.
Oh.
So do you want me to turn off some track changes or something? Because,
No, I
Not
don't think that's.
Let me find it.
this is what Joe sent me last. Maybe he sent it to,
Can you forward the email I just sent you? Because that has, I think, everything what we need.
this doesn't look familiar, Joe? I'm sorry.
That is. Yes, that is a version.
Is a
That is a version.
That's the familiar version. That's the version that I reviewed and gave
Yes.
you comments on, which you
Yes.
then further revised. So that's old. That's about 2 weeks old.
Okay.
Beth, I just forwarded you the email that Joe resent to me
Okay, thanks.
earlier today. So if you click on the attachments, that's the correct version.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Okay.
And it's still called ATM warrant.
It is.
Okay.
Yeah. While Beth is looking for that, Joe, this might be helpful
Mhm.
just to discuss with the board present. So you mentioned a moment ago that you changed, at my suggestion, you changed the term accessory apartment to accessory dwelling units because
Yes.
that's the terminology that's
Right.
used in the state statute. What I did find when I looked at your version is that there's actually a ton of it.
It still says apartment places?
It is. It says it in B. Let's see, B3.
Accessory, well,
It
okay.
says it in C.
In C1,
It says it in C. It says it in C. The title to C. It says it in C1.
DU.
It says it in C3. It says it right. So
accessory DU.
and I also didn't review the entirety of the remaining zoning bylaw to see if there's other references anywhere else within the zoning
I
bylaw
have to
to
look at the
access.
whole bylaw, right?
So one way to avoid this, if you're concerned about inconsistencies, is rather than try and change every reference to it, when we first talk about what it is, so in the purpose section where we say recognizing the need to provide alternative housing options for family members and residents of the town, the following regulations are established for accessory dwelling units in a residential district. You could say the following regulations are established for accessory dwelling units, comma, also known as accessory apartments, comma, in a residential district. And then you can use the either term interchangeably throughout the bylaw and you define them as both.
Okay.
So we do that sometimes when it's going to be, let's say we look through the whole bylaw, we found 70 other references to accessory
Yeah.
apartment. We don't want to put a warrant article together that says, here are the 70 references throughout the
Yeah.
zoning bylaw.
Hard time.
You save that until you're doing a recodification,
Yeah,
right?
That's
So that might be the way to go about it.
okay, that's a thought. All right.
All right, trying this again. Sorry. Don't know why it's having a hard time tonight. All right, I'll see what I can do with that. How's that?
That one gives me a lot of saves. All right. All right, so there now we move on to section B. Okay. There were I changed some language here. There's a comment about in versus on. So the language now reads. So the language now reads, the owners or owners of a single-family dwelling or a single-family dwelling unit in an RA or RB district may by right construct an accessory dwelling unit within the primary single-family dwelling, within an existing outbuilding, within an addition to the single-family dwelling or outbuilding, or in a new outbuilding. Okay, so those are the four different options that we laid out. To take care of the language, I just explained them entirely there.
But you had said, excuse me, you had said B and we're in C and I don't see that language that you
I'm
just.
not in C, I'm in B.
So we don't have that version.
Oh, I see.
Beth, could you scroll up to B?
To B? Oh, sorry.
B.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
B as in B?
Yeah,
Yes.
B, you're there, but there's no redlining there, but it's
No.
in B.
Okay.
Okay,
So just for board members' benefits, when you talk about redlining, so
Oh, I meant
for
the red verbiage there.
I think for convenience, Joe didn't redline his changes. He just colored in red the text that is
Right,
meant
right,
to refer
right.
to things we need to discuss.
I did, right, I
Okay,
didn't.
but there are none in B.
Right, right, there's no red language in B, there is some language that's changed. Okay, I did not put everything I changed into the red. The red represents things that we still need to talk about. Items that I changed that were in conformance with items that Adam caught, I have not included in red, and that's why I'm going through them with you verbally now. Okay, so the first one was the use of accessory dwelling units in place of accessory apartments. The second was the rewriting of that language to get rid of, so that it didn't just say the word in, make it clear that accessory apartments are also allowed outside of and attached to single-family homes. So in order to do that, I just listed all of the different options on the lot. The next item, we eliminated one of the requirements earlier was it stated In B1, in no case shall there be more than one accessory apartment established on a lot. That is still there as B3. It's included as a new one. Does not require construct. Okay, so B1 lays out when a site plan approval is required. Okay, and that is the construction of a new or primary accessory structure, or increase in the height and footprint of an existing structure, shall require site plan approval under the new site plan approval bylaw. Number 2, does not require the creation of an ADU that does not include the construction of a new building or addition of on an existing building does not require site plan approval. That's as was decided at the last meeting.
Yes.
The new number 4, the new and existing unit shall conform to the requirements of the state sanitary code as confirmed by the Board of Health. The applicant shall obtain and submit to the building commission a written report explaining that the changes, if any, to the existing septic system have been agreed to by the applicant. Now, Adam had brought up a comment about this, about why we're bringing in a note here rather than just making it a requirement. And I think I understand why that's desirable out here in Townsend, where everything is really being driven by the availability of septic. It is really good for the applicant to confront that right up front before they get any further into the process. So I left that in there, despite Adam's suggestion, for that purpose, to leave that in there right up front and have, it's making the applicant go through the zoning, look into this question before in the zoning process, before they get too far into it. I think it's fine to leave it in there, to require that note so that they're getting in there to the Board of Health early on in the process.
Adam, do you think it needs to be required? Or just could be required?
So I have no objection to the substance of what 4 says. My only comment was, you'll see in this bylaw that, and it's hard to see because you're looking at only a snippet of it on the screen, but each of these sections, A has a title. It's called A is purpose.
Yes.
C, the title is requirements for an accessory apartment. B doesn't really have a title, but if I were to give it one, I would call it applicability, because this is how bylaws are structured. And so B is saying, okay, when does this bylaw apply? Well, it applies if you're creating an ADU involving the construction of a new building, or you're increasing the height or footprint of an existing building, it applies. If you're creating an accessory apartment that does not involve those things, it doesn't apply, and you can only have one per lot. That's B1, 2, and 3. B4 seemed out of place because B4 is talking about a substantive requirement, which is compliance with the code. I'm not objecting to having to comply with the code. I think that should be a requirement, but usually we would put that under subsection C, which is called requirements for the accessory apartment. And in fact, if you scroll down to C7, it's in there. C7 says, or C6, adequate provision must be provided for the disposal of sewage, waste, and drainage of such accessory dwelling unit in accordance with the Board of Health requirements. And then 7 says you need a note from the building department. So it's sort of already in there. So I saw it up in B4 and said, well, why is it in here twice? That was my comment. There's no harm, I suppose, in it being in there twice, but I just flagged it because I said it doesn't really need to be in the applicability section.
Can we consolidate that language to C6?
We could consolidate 4 and 6 together. Yes.
That makes sense. We're not looking to make the document longer than it needs to be.
Yeah. Yep. But that makes this actually makes it shorter. Good. Excellent. All right. Fine.
Thank you, Andrew.
All right. Now that brings us to C, requirements for an accessory apartment. The new language. An accessory apartment, whether attached to the primary residence or located in a secondary structure, that's supposed to be secondary structure, is accessory to the principal residence. No new buildings shall be constructed and no increase made to the height footprint of the existing structure for the purpose of creating an accessory apartment unless authorized by site plan review by the planning board under our new section. Number 3. The size requirements from the state law. made some, with some minor language modifications suggested by Adam.
Should C4 say accessory apartment instead of accessory dwelling unit?
We are redefining them to be interchangeable, but we are talking about accessory dwelling units. I've mostly replaced accessory apartments with dwelling units throughout the document.
Okay.
And the final change we're going to make is to go back and just define them as the same thing. So it's okay to use either. C4. Okay, the original requirement was that it needs to retain the appearance of a single family home, period. Based on a comment by Adam and based on further guidance that we've gotten from the state, that may be a little, it may be problematic if we impose that as an across the board requirement. There may be some situation where in an existing home, it only works to have the entrance to the other apartment on the front facade for some reason. Somebody could raise that. That makes it look like a two-family. That doesn't make it look like a single-family home. I can certainly understand why it's still preferable aesthetically from the town, and it wishes to promote that. I think you move that to site plan review, and that gives you it gives you enough hand to encourage that where it can be done while still having the discretion to authorize one with that type of plan if there's really no other way to get around it. Sound good to the board? Okay, so that's why I did that. Okay, Adam had a comment on AC9. Okay, yes, about significantly altering the appearance.
Which one are you on C9?
Yes, I'm on on the previous one. It said the addition of an accessory apartment shall not cause the appearance to be significantly altered from the appearance of the existing structure and shall not increase the footprint unless authorized by site plan review. And Adam pointed out that this wasn't consistent language. That language has now been made consistent. This is the language that we've gotten for here.
Have we addressed number 2 on the screen? Because
What's number 2 on the screen?
it's no new building shall be constructed.
And no increase made to the height or footprint of an existing structure for the purpose of creating an accessory apartment unless authorized by site plan review.
How does that change from B? How is that different from B1? Because again, these are requirements for accessory apartments.
Yes.
B1 is telling you about the triggers. So B1 tells you when you need site plan review. And B1 says you need site plan review if you're constructing a new primary or accessory structure, or you're increasing the height or increasing the footprint of the existing structure. That seems to be the same thing.
Yes, they are. Yeah, that is more or less the same thing.
Are you suggesting that could be consolidated, or do you need
I just don't think
trigger?
I don't think you need
a
a
requirement.
Right. I mean, it is a requirement by virtue of being a trigger. The trigger is telling you when it applies, and that's when it applies.
Okay.
So then you can get rid of that. C2.
That makes sense, Joe.
I'm almost thinking actually we should get rid of it here in C.
Yes.
And keep it in B.
No, I agree.
Yes,
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
let's move this. So we're taking 2
Take 2 out.
and yeah, but 4 makes more sense to keep in C, right? Yeah, this is a requirement. This isn't, an authorization of what they're allowed to do. I think this makes more sense in this
Which one are you looking at?
C4.
Well, C4 is talking about the appearance of a single family home. We talked about striking that because we said that that's inconsistent with the new regs. That's what C4 says.
Just get rid of it altogether.
Yeah.
Unless authorized by site plan approval. Since the town is allowed to make the town would be allowed to make all ADUs by site plan approval, wouldn't it? I mean,
Yes.
yes, which means that they could make a subset of them authorized by site plan approval and another subset not authorized by site plan approval.
And you've done that because you've said that if you're constructing a new building or if you're increasing the height or the footprint of an existing building, it requires site plan approval. And if you're doing neither of those things, in other words, you found an existing space within your building, you're not increasing the height, maybe it was an attic space, maybe it was an unfinished portion of the home. If you're converting something within the existing building envelope, you can do that without site plan
Oh,
approval.
I see. So, okay, so the language that I've got here is contradictory. This is, if we say, I say in 2, the creation of accessory apartment that does not include the construction of a new building or the addition of an accessory building shall not require site plan approval. Now, further down here, I say that one type of those projects would require site plan approval. If you're adding an ADU in an existing single-family home in a way that causes it to alter its appearance from a single-family home, now that does require site plan approval. So it seems to me that to keep that rule in there, we'd have to add that up in 1 as one of the in B1 as one of the types of projects that requires site plan approval.
I agree, and I guess this is a question for the board as to how hard you want to make the building commissioner's job, right? So, building commissioner has two options now. He looks at a set of plans. If an applicant comes to him and says, "Here's what I want to do," and says, "Okay, are you increasing the height or altering and enlarging the footprint, or are you proposing a whole new structure?" If the answer is yes to any of those questions, go to the planning board first and come back to me. If you're not doing any of those things, the answer is simple. You're good to go. Where do I sign your permit application? Now we're adding another layer. We're saying if it falls in the second category, then the building inspector has to look even closer and say, well, let me see your architectural drawings. Are you altering in what constitutes an alteration of the single family character of a building, the appearance of a single family home? Who makes that judgment call? The building commissioner? You can do it. It's adding an additional layer of complication onto the building commissioner's job, having to now look at the plans more closely and determine whether the appearance of a single family home is being altered. If I add, and to your point earlier, if I add a second door and it's front facing, does that change the appearance? I don't know. I live in a single family home. It looks like a single family home, and I have a farmer's porch and I have 2 front doors, one in my garage and one in my house. It looks like a single family. Nobody would think otherwise. It is a single family. But in some houses, it may not look that way. It's very subjective. So,
Do you have any other communities doing language like this?
I have some communities that are subjecting all ADUs to site plan approval, and that way they all come before the planning board, and you would be able to make that determination as a board. Those subjective decisions are better made as a board when you have an application before you. The counter argument to that is it adds a layer of complication, and we're going to get to this in a moment when we start talking about requirements for site plan approval, like stamped engineered plans. It adds a layer of complication. If we're talking about somebody proposing a shopping plaza, you expect them to come before you with their lawyer, their engineer, their stormwater expert, and a package that thick for an application. When somebody wants to put an ADU together, you want to be sure that you've got some review, but you also don't want to overcomplicate it for them. This is somebody that wants to put a small addition usually for a family member. It doesn't have to be. And so you want to kind of balance that. So I do have communities that are doing it both ways. It's just really a judgment for you as to how you want to present it and what you think will pass muster at town meeting.
From the planning point of view, what would the town be getting for this additional complication for making the building commissioner make these judgment calls? It would be a little bit of extra aesthetic protection in terms of what the exterior of a home looks like. But thinking about this rule would only apply to a single family home in which somebody is adding an accessory dwelling unit. This is something that somebody would be doing to their own home. Okay. And I mean, really, let's face it, an alteration, even if there's an alteration that's changing the exterior of a home so that there's a second front door visible and it's very clear that there's an accessory apartment here. That's not really a major objectionable aesthetic intrusion into a neighborhood. It's not the construction of a 50-foot tall multifamily apartment building. This is someone's own home that they're making what ultimately is only going to be so much much alteration going on that to add an accessory dwelling unit here. I'm not sure that this rule is really gets the town much in terms of protection for the complications that it adds into the process, and for the building commissioner and for the single family home owners. Let's keep in mind, we're not talking developers here. Ideally, if this actually works, it'll be ordinary, regular homeowners, and we should really try to write the law for that.
I think it's meaningful that neither the legislature nor EOHLC in adopting the draft regulations has addressed issues of appearance of the single family character of a district or the individual homes. And I think the reason for that is because by right now, under the new law, you can construct an independent separate structure on your property. So if your objection here is, well, we want to have some say and some control over somebody who, even though they're not increasing the height or the footprint of their home, is going to do something such that when you drive by, you say, wow, that lot has 2 dwelling units on it. Well, they can by right put a whole separate building with another dwelling unit on it, at which point you're going to drive by and say, wow, there's a separate building with a separate dwelling unit on it. So I think there's a recognition, and this is partly why I flagged this. I didn't flag it so much as me objecting to providing some oversight of the appearance. I wasn't sure that attempting to regulate the appearance is something that would be consistent with the current law.
I think it's too subjective.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm okay with it.
I'm good with getting rid of it.
I'll lose this entirely. Okay. Yeah, so now we're back to the only 2 types of site plan approvals are an addition to a single family home or outbuilding, or an addition to or a new outbuilding. Okay.
Are the members that are, I guess it's just Lori, are you comfortable with that, Lori?
I'm comfortable with what you guys all just agreed to. Is that what you're?
Yes.
Okay, so that's a consensus of everyone who's there and myself.
Yes.
All right. C3 here, I just fixed the language, gross language and things. Adam, does that read right now?
It does. You have to add the word gross in a second time though, because there's 2 references to floor area.
I need the gross in second time. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Got it. All right, we just dropped number 4. Number 5. Okay, adequate. One or more parking spaces must be provided for the use of the accessory apartment.
So my only question here, and maybe board members know this, maybe Lori knows it, I don't know. Do you have any public bus routes that run through Townsend from neighboring from Fitchburg or Leominster or?
We have the MART bus that I think
Yes.
was just recently suspended because of lack of ridership.
Okay.
Yeah, but you can, it's still available by appointment, so it's not
Which is the
suspended
fixed
fully.
route.
But that's all we have. We don't have any, and usually the MART bus picks people up at their homes or the building they live in or something like that. That it's not a bus route.
Right,
Lori,
okay.
it actually is, yes. It does, you have to call for service, but it's
Yeah.
not a door service. No.
It's not door to door. Oh, you mean you still have to go to the parking lot in town and it takes you to
Yeah.
certain?
Yeah, it goes from Townsend Town Hall to Fitchburg Intermodal.
So the reason that this came up, Adam was clearly on the same webinar I was. The state put out some draft guidance on this, and they want feedback. One of the statements in the ADU is that you can only require, in the ADU law, in the state law, you can only require 1 parking space per ADU. And you cannot require a parking space for an ADU if it is within a certain distance of a train or bus or commuter rail or ferry station. So that's the law. So now they come up with guidance. And in their guidance, they say that they're going to interpret the phrase bus station to mean that if you have a bus route that has flag down service, the entire bus route is a bus station, and you can't require a parking space for an accessory dwelling unit. Now, that's their draft regulations. They're seeking feedback. I suspect they're going to get an awful lot of feedback about that one. We're going to send our own feedback about that being a bad idea.
We don't have a flag bus
But
route.
you don't have a flag bus route. So this is somebody else's problem. So the language I have here is one or more parking spaces must be provided for the use of the accessory apartment. That is, you can only require one or more must be provided. If they provide one, then they've met the requirement.
Sounds legal and appropriate.
And I would suggest taking out the words "or more" because my concern is that the AG is going to flag that and say you're giving the discretion to the board to require more.
Okay. Oh, I see.
One parking space must be provided, or more parking space must be provided. So I would just say one parking space must be provided for the accessory apartment. In reality, we're not in Somerville; we're in Townsend.
Yeah.
The lots where these are proposed are likely going to have plenty of parking.
And what if they're just having an elderly person live there that doesn't have a car?
Right. So, I mean, you have the ability to eliminate it altogether. You're permitted to require one parking space. If you're not on board with that, you think that, to your point, you may have individuals who don't have any vehicles. So why would you require that at all? You could eliminate that last sentence altogether.
If it's in a situation where someone has an elderly member they're building an apartment for, can they count their existing spaces? Could they conceivably, depending on the makeup of their property?
It depends upon the makeup of the property, right? So if you have a parking requirement, let's say that is 2 spaces per single family home, and I don't recall what's in your zoning bylaw, but let's say it's 2 spaces per single family home, and you had a residence on a small lot, and all they have is 2 parking spaces, no garage, and 2 tandem parking spaces and a short driveway. They would need a 3rd space under this requirement. And if they couldn't
They
provide
probably
it,
wouldn't be able to do it anyway. If they're on a small lot and can only have 2 parking spaces, if they're going to have an accessory, it's going to be inside, right? I mean,
right. I don't, and you know the, I know the makeup of your community fairly well, but let's say you had a very small lot, let's say call it a 4,000 square foot lot, but you had a large home on it that took up most of the lot. That was a 2 or a 3 family, an older home, and maybe the home is 3,000 square feet, and the footprint of that home is 1,000 square feet, and you get a little driveway. There may be interior space to convert to an accessory apartment if the structure is 3,000 square feet. I don't know how many.
we have that. We have that actually in town.
Yeah.
So given, I'm just trying to think through it now, given how they would be doing it within their apartment, it wouldn't need, or within their building, it wouldn't need a special permit. But here in the requirements, they don't come before us, would they still need the parking space, or they wouldn't?
They would, because the requirements apply whether it's
But we would
subject
enforce
to,
it, or the building
the
inspector?
building inspector would enforce it. So he would have to deny the building permit if they presented plans and they didn't have a 3rd parking spot. He'd have to deny the building permit on the basis that they didn't have a spot. You can do that. You'd be permitted to do that even under the current legislation, because it does say you're allowed to require a parking spot, unless they change that in the next version of the regulations.
Is that something that can be waived by the planning board or
subject to building commissioner's discretion?
Yes, so not under the current language where it just says it must be provided. I mean, the first sentence is adequate provision shall be made for off-street parking. So the first sentence gives some discretion, but the second sentence is clear that 1 space must be provided. It sets forth a minimum.
So I guess you delete the last sentence.
You could.
You could,
And it's just-
but then again,
But then you're not.
but then again, say you do an accessory dwelling unit for an elderly person without a car, that person dies. Somebody else moves in with a car.
Sure.
So where are they gonna park if you don't require that one space?
Fair point.
Yeah, we really need to envision these accessory dwelling units as potentially being on the market rental properties.
Sure.
On the open market. The state very clearly wants us to get these laws away from the in-law apartment model where you're making rules about who can live there, assuming it's safer because of that.
Yeah, and with off-street parking during the winter months and, I'd like to just leave it there.
Yeah, okay.
So a parking space.
Okay.
Is an accessory apartment. All right. And number 4. Okay, and yeah, number 6 here. I'm taking number 4 and from up above and consolidating it there
Yes,
as number 6,
yes.
and that'll be fine. Next page. Yep, everything's fine with the sewage. Okay, number 7. Okay, this note. This will be supported by a note from the building department that the appropriate codes have been observed. This is. Yeah, let's talk about this one. Yeah, I had mentioned earlier the benefit of making the applicant go into the Board of Health and check on the septic situation early in the process. This one here, any kind of construction of a unit, they're going to have to, the building commissioner will look and confirm that it meets the state building code. This last line on number 7.
No, it's okay.
This last line on number 7 about the requirements of the state building code for safe egress. This will be supported by a note from the building department that the appropriate codes have been observed. I'm not sure that last line is necessary. I mean, plucking one particular line requirement out of the building code and putting it in here, but then not even any enforcement or anything, just saying that it will confirm that the building code has been observed. Your building commissioner already does confirm that the state building codes are being observed. I think we can use that line.
Yeah,
No issue with it. Seems redundant.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Oh yeah, I eliminated the unnecessary parenthetical from D.
It's sort of interesting as I'm reading D here, you can see it on the screen.
Yep.
We had talked a moment ago, and I don't want to confuse anybody, but and Beth, you don't need to scroll up, but when we go back to B4, remember that language that said that the applicant shall obtain and submit to the building commissioner a report of the Board of Health that the septic system would be okay, and you talked about moving that from B4 down into into C7 or C6. I don't even know if it needs to be moved into C6 because you've got it here a third time in D, right? Because D1 says the applicant.
Well, yeah, making reference to that report. If we're going to lose anything, then let's lose this reference here in D.
That's fine.
Yeah, I'm not sure why that's calling back to that. Just eliminate the up to the word Board of Health. So it says, with provisions of Article 11 of this bylaw, the planning board shall grant site plan approval as follows. Okay, we're just eliminating reference to a due consideration because we're sure the planning board already gives due consideration to that report.
No, I'm talking about D1. I'm not talking about the introductory section. I mean, you can.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so I'm fine with it being due consideration of the report, but then D1 says the applicant shall obtain and submit to the planning board a written report of the Board of Health explaining the changes to the existing. It's verbatim the same language that was just up in B4. So now we've got it said a third time. So I think we can delete D1.
Yeah, which just turns D into a statement about a public hearing.
You're right. I mean, D should just say in accordance with the bylaw, the planning board shall conduct a public hearing and grant site plan approval after due consideration of the application and the recommendation of the Board of Health.
Board members, good with that?
Yes.
Removal of D1. Thank you.
Let's see here.
What is Article 9 of this bylaw? All right, if this is only going to be, yeah, we're getting rid of D1. I think that means we can also get rid of the introductory language in D and the language of 2. The planning board shall have a public hearing on the application in accordance with the procedures specified in 145-42-1 of this bylaw is all of D now.
Do we
Yeah,
even need
that's
that?
Yeah, that's
Or-
fine.
See, I don't think there's anything in the top there I need,
Yeah.
so all of that goes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, excellent. We are making this concise. All right, now.
Adam, you
I
were
put-
good with that?
I am.
I heard everybody
And,
else. Thank you.
I put E and F entirely in red. I am prepared to discuss with how to change this, the affordable accessory apartment program, if you'd like to, but I concur with Adam's recommendation that it would be best to remove E and also F entirely.
And so here's the comment that I made just to provide some additional context. And I know there's a lot here, and I like the theory of this concept of an affordable accessory apartment program, and I think that it existed for good reason, or it exists for good reason in the existing town zoning bylaw. But we're really restructuring in its entirety the existing town zoning bylaw as it relates to accessory apartments because the state has told us we have to do so. The state has said that these are now allowed by right. So before, as I understood it, and I don't know, I wasn't involved in the drafting of this provision, these provisions concerning affordable accessory apartments, but as I understood it, as I read it today, the idea is, listen, we're going to allow some accessory apartments in a very limited fashion, but we're gonna provide you with greater flexibility to build out an accessory apartment if you agree to deem the accessory apartment affordable. We'll let you build accessory apartments you wouldn't otherwise be able to use. Because as it exists today, you've got all these provisions in your existing bylaw that regulate when it's allowed, when it's not allowed. Moving forward, it's by right because the state has said it's by right. So who is going to say, okay, I can build any type of an accessory apartment by right, whether it's simply with a building permit or by way of a non-discretionary site plan approval that the planning board effectively can't deny. But instead, I'm going to opt to proceed under this affordable accessory apartment program that's going to restrict me to only renting to individuals that qualify for affordable housing, require me to place a permanent restriction on the property, require all this red tape where I have to submit an application to the state and I have to get out there. Who's going to opt for that option when they can do this by right now under state law?
No one.
So I just, no one. So it seems like a lot of language creating this affordable apartment program that nobody's going to use.
Not even the unicorn who wants to build an ADU and make it a dedicated affordable unit would use this.
No one.
They just put in one by right and then put the affordability protections in place on themselves.
Right.
I'll get rid of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's E, and F is also.
If I just may say, unless the state reduce their requirements of what an individual versus a development, but an individual wanting to make it affordable, unless that changes, nobody's going to go for it. It's way too expensive to help the town with their percentage. It's got to be worked out. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, that's the end of the ADU bylaw. And we can move
Adam,
on.
any other comment to that?
No other comment on that. I will just say for Joe, I've been trying to make these as we've discussed them and I'm redlining them. So I'm going to send you what I'm done with. Hopefully I've captured what you're making your notes and so feel free to adjust it further, but I'm trying to make the changes we're talking about as we're talking about this. So.
Thank
While
you.
we're talking while we're talking about administration, what's the schedule like here? I'm off today and on again Friday.
So we've got some, if you don't mind, Lori, I discussed this with staff today. So we've got some
Please.
flexibility in terms of timing. So we have, the planning board has moved its public hearing forward. They moved it from what was supposed to be the 13th to the 9th of January.
Okay.
So they moved it ahead 4 days. The
Well,
purpose
some
of
of
that
them
is-
did. Some of them
What-
did. Is that what's already posted for this?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I worked with Beth yesterday or Friday, I guess it was, on the public hearing notice. So that public hearing notice, has it gone to the newspaper yet, Beth?
Yes, that's been posted by the clerk, and it's publishing on the 26th, and the
Great.
2nd.
Okay.
So
So
that'll,
that being
Carol,
said,
you're going to be chairing the public hearing.
Am I gonna be cheering? Oh, okay.
Yes, because MRPC holds their meeting that night, and I'll be there.
and
Oh,
I would be surprised if much of anything happens at the public hearing. I mean, you could have people attend, but this has been discussed at a lot of open public meetings already, right?
Yeah.
So
Sure.
anyway, anything's
And that's at
possible.
7:00, right?
6:30. 6:30.
Okay. If it's only going to be a half hour, we're good.
And if I may say, I probably probably had the clerk post a little prematurely, because I already was asked for the text of the bylaw changes. So tonight it's really important and I'm glad that, Adam, you're documenting everything, because those will need to go and be available for the public tomorrow. No pressure, but I can take the notice down, but I did end up posting it, and in the notice, it says, obviously, contact Beth for the text of the bylaw, which I don't, we need to have tomorrow morning to give to the public.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not terribly concerned about that. If it's not ready, it's not ready. I mean, it's
Okay.
But yes, the sooner we can have it, the better.
Okay.
But the objective here was to give us more time. We have a drop dead date of January 14th to post the town meeting warrant 14 days prior to the January 28th town meeting.
oh, and so in case there's any changes that come out of that public meeting,
Right. We want, because literally the 9th is a Thursday, the 10th is a Friday, and it's the following Tuesday there's a deadline for posting the warrant. So it's all fairly tight,
okay.
but moving it back to the 9th did give us some additional flexibility.
In my public hearing, I better go to that. To hear the public, to hear what needs to change, if anything. All right. Okay, that's cool. We'll get this document ready. Okay, let's move on to site plan review. Okay. All right, so the first one, non-controversial, no comments from Adam, no amend Article 9, Section 145-42B by adding following language. It's this is the exemptions to your site plan review special permit. No site plan review special permit shall be required for ADUs constructed in accordance with our ADU section. Subject to site plan approval shall instead, wait, what? Period. Section, no site plan review permit shall be required for ADUs constructed in accordance with 145-36. Accessory dwelling units subject to site plan approval shall instead be subject to 145-42.1. Okay.
Can you share a copy with Beth?
Beth, can you share this second document? It's the second attachment on the email that I sent to you a few minutes ago.
Well, that's coming up. There were far fewer changes made to this. Adam's first comment was consistency with the new bylaw, the new ADU. And so I did go back and the applicability. In order to make it consistent, Okay, instead of describing all of these instances of describing here all the instances of when an ADU needs to come for site plan approval, I just make a reference to the ADU section. The ADU section tells you when the ADU needs a site plan approval. The construction of an accessory dwelling unit shall be subject to review under this section as described in 14536 accessory dwelling units in residential districts. You go to 14536 and it tells you which kinds do and which kinds don't need site plan approval.
Okay.
All right. Is that good, Adam?
Yep.
So, and remember, we're trying to draw up this bylaw so that we can just drop the multifamily overlay district references into it and vice versa. So I leave this kind of generic, and I'll do the same thing here. In A, I'm going to add another sentence. The construction of residential units under the multifamily overlay district shall be subject to review under the section as described in the MFOD section. And you can just keep adding more as you want to. B, submission requirements, application fee for site plan approval, site plans that show the position of the buildings, positions of buildings, parking, stormwater, utilities, planned existing landscape treatments, including any screening of adjacent properties, period. Now, the next line is, and other information commonly required by municipality for site plan approval. This is like your first site plan approval. There is nothing else, so that line didn't mean very much. What do you think of the requirements here? Points of vehicular access to and from the site, and vehicular circulation on the site, parking, stormwater management, utilities, planned and existing landscape treatments, including any screening of adjacent properties. Now, that may sound a little bit like overkill for an ADU. It's written as generic language to apply to any kind of projects. I think it's comprehensive enough to encompass multifamily properties as well. Is there anything else you think needs to be in that list? Or anything that should come out?
Certainly got enough. Got a lot in there.
Yeah.
Do
Now,
other
for an
communities have
ADU.
that much? How do they approach?
So my other communities have that much, and some have much, much more.
Okay.
I think, in my mind, and this is just based on my experience, and some of you have it too, with Townsend and with Townsend Town Meeting, and the questions that tend to arise at Townsend Town Meeting, and you're not alone in this regard. As I understand this from my conversations with Joe, he structured a site plan approval, site plan review bylaw. He actually did it, he told me earlier tonight, he actually did it in the context of your discussions about MBTA zoning, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the idea was to replace what you currently call a site plan special permit, which some communities have lingering, and I hate it. And I always advise that they eliminate it because it confuses site plan review with special permits, which are different. So the idea was, let's replace your site plan special permit combination and create site plan approval that is a non-discretionary process for shaping projects. I think that's great. And so he structured this very generic site plan review bylaw. And then when you decided you weren't going to move forward next month, January, with the MBTA communities zoning, and instead you were going to first move forward with ADUs, he's made some changes to make this apply to ADUs, but he's kept the overall structure. That's fine. But Joe just said, what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to go into applicability, and we're going to have to add to that one sentence there that says the construction of ADUs are subject to site plan review, and you're going to have to add also MBTA communities, and also whatever else you're going to subject, and you're going to make those changes in the future. Same thing when you go up to the very introductory section where it says the provisions of this section 145-42 shall not apply to accessory dwelling units, accessory apartments subject to site plan approval, shall be blah, blah, blah. You're going to have to add to that. Well, if you're going to go in and add to all these sections later, then why are we including now at this early stage some of the other components that aren't going to ever apply to ADUs? Because you're going to get somebody that gets up at town meeting and says, and we haven't gotten this far yet, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but they're going to say, vehicular access to and from the site, vehicular circulation, parking, stormwater management, utilities, landscaping treatments, and screening. that's what you're going to subject ADUs to, and you think that's in compliance with the new law, and you're going to say, no, we promise we're not going to. It's just in here because this is a boilerplate for future site plan review. Future site plan review. Well, we haven't gotten there yet. We'll tell you about that at the next town meeting. Well, yeah, but we're voting on this now.
Yeah, okay.
We've heard that before at town meeting. And then we haven't, the next one, I'm sure Joe's going to touch upon is you've got a requirement here for site plans. That's fine. But the site plan has to be prepared by a certified architect, landscape architect, civil engineer. All landscape plans shall be prepared by a certified landscape architect registered in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. It defines the scale. Do you want to require that for ADUs? It's okay if you do. Some communities might. I don't think that's contrary to the law. But it might be a lot if you're expecting to make this process fairly simple for somebody just wanting to add an ADU into their existing residence or a small addition.
Would this apply if it was like an addition or an outbuilding?
Yeah, it might, but you might word the language differently and reserve that discretion. The board in its discretion may require plans to be approved by a certified architect, but you might adjust the language somewhat, right?
Okay.
But I guess that's my point as we go through all of this, and it's only a couple of pages, but you got a section in here on project phasing. You got a section in here on compliance with development standards. What development standards? They don't even exist yet. And yet you're referring to them here. That's fine. I understand that you're trying to create a structure, but you will get these questions at town meeting because we've gotten them before. What's all this language mean? And then they hear, well, we're not going to tell you yet because we're not there yet. And what are you up to, Selectmen, Planning Board? You're trying to sneak something through, and before you know it, we could go down in flames.
Yes.
It's happened many times before.
It will
I
happen
don't think
again.
that the substantive requirements of B2 are actually that onerous for an ADU.
Okay.
What's a vehicular access, vehicular circulation on site parking? What does that mean for an ADU? They show the driveway. They show the driveway and the new little prong off the addition to the driveway that they're planning on putting on. That's not so bad. Stormwater management, there isn't, virtually all of these, there's no stormwater management. It's just an ADU. Utilities, if there are new utilities coming in, and you don't have a requirement for separate utilities on this, which is good. If there are new utilities coming in, then they'd have to have documents drawn up for their building applications and stuff anyway, showing those. If there aren't, then they don't have to, there are new utilities coming in, then they wouldn't be showing any. I don't think that really it poses too much of a requirement. Planned and existing landscaping treatments, including any screening of adjacent properties. Okay. Now let's think about that. We're trying to write this for it won't be too burdensome for the regular homeowner. Okay. I don't think that's too burdensome for the regular homeowner. On the other hand, I do think that that's comprehensive enough to encompass the multifamily overlay district projects. What do you think? What would you think about in B, where the applicant must submit the following documents to the planning board? The planning board may change it to the planning board may require the following documents.
I think what you could do is you could give the planning board the authority to waive. I always hesitate using terms like the board may require, because remember, if you're an applicant, you're reading this bylaw to tell you what's required. You don't know what the planning board may require because you're not in front of the planning board yet. How do you know what it may require? You need to know what to put together to submit. So you can say unless waived, and usually what that means is an applicant will go through 1, 2, 3, 4 and say, okay, I'm not going to provide the following items in 2, and they'll submit a waiver request letter with their application. We've submitted all the following, but we request a waiver from the requirement of showing existing land or proposed landscaping and screening because our addition is in the back of the house and it can't be seen from neighboring properties. So you could say unless waived by the board.
Yeah. Now let's also keep in mind that you chose not to have site plan approval if you're not changing the footprint of the building or anything. So the only ones who are going to be coming in for this are people who are putting an addition on a house, building a new building, or putting an addition on another building. So, okay, so let's see. So looking at 3, elevation of the buildings, showing the architectural designs of the buildings being added. being added or altered. Okay. This is, now, this is only in cases where they are altering buildings, so they need to have these drawn up anyway. I don't think that's an owner's requirement. All site plans shall be prepared by a certified architect, landscape architect, and or a civil engineer registered in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. This is a tricky one.
I think we should take that out.
Yeah, could an architect from New Hampshire, I mean, is it like a pro board thing? They're all registered everywhere, or?
I mean, what if I, as a homeowner,
State by
brought in
state.
a 8.5 by 11 sheet of piece of paper and said, this is my house, this is
Yeah,
my
yeah.
ADU,
Yeah,
this is my trees that I'm
This is
gonna
what
put
I'm
over
gonna
here to
do.
screen from my neighbors and.
But
I
if
have
you're
all- I have
adding
all the
on, but
requirements.
if you're adding an addition on, you would want all of this. If
Yeah.
you were adding an actual addition, if you're just doing it within the confines of your house, you wouldn't even be
Right, or the confines of.
do this. But if you're physically putting an addition on the house, you're gonna want architectural drawings of that addition. I
I think
think
most
The building
homeowners
permit guy,
would,
the building permit guy is gonna request
all of that.
stamp drawings.
Yeah,
You're
so,
gonna require it for a building permit, so.
so wouldn't we just get copies of them then?
Yeah, but
This is just for a site plan.
Oh,
you
is
will, but
this-
this is for site plan prior to.
Okay.
Just to be clear, I had no objection to the first sentence, because I think if you're a homeowner that wants to put an addition on your home for an ADU, the next stop after the planning board is the building department. So
Okay.
why not just have your engineer, or my concern was with the second sentence requiring
Yeah.
landscape plans be prepared by
Yeah.
a certified landscape architect. I mean, a lot of these homeowners, they're required as a matter of code to get an engineer to design the addition to their home.
Oh,
They're not required to hire a landscape architect
Yeah,
to
I-
determine where they're gonna put their arborvitae. Right.
yeah, I can, because I just hired the local landscaper to plug in I said, where's a good spot for my arborvitae? He says, over there. I said, good, put it there. So I'm
Joe,
good
what
with,
was the-
I'm good with getting rid of the registered landscape architect.
I don't mind getting rid of it. Did you have a reason, Joe, that you,
Yeah, why was it put in?
Because it was originally written for the multifamily overlay district. And envisioning some fairly large projects for which these requirements would be entirely appropriate.
Okay, so we could add it in later, right? If we do this for the multifamily overlay district or whatever, then you wanted to add it back in, but take it out for now, because you're right, I'm not gonna hire a landscape. I'm just gonna hire my local landscaper down the street. I'll plant my own tree. I have so many trees I need to take down, never mind plant.
We want to turn into a giant HOA.
Any other comments from the board?
So,
What's next?
I'm not settled, I'm not sure that I'm settled, I understand what the directions are for number 4. I mean, do you want to get,
I think we're just striking the second sentence.
okay, we're striking the second sentence. Yes, now, when we come around to do the multifamily overlay district bylaw, that will, we can have specific requirements for the site plan approvals in those sections.
Sure.
So, for example, this problem of how to write the law so it's strict enough for multifamily overlay districts and loose enough for regular homeowners doing an ADU, I think it's a good idea to take advantage of that. We could put waiver language in the ADU section to requirements that are in this. So for example, if we leave the requirement that the landscaping plan be done, leave the requirement here in the site plan review section that the landscape plan be written by a landscape architect, but add a line in the ADU section saying then it doesn't.
Well, why couldn't you just parenthesize after that sentence if the board wants to do this with does not apply to ADUs? Why wouldn't you just have it like right here?
And I guess my question is it necessary to have a landscape architect involved with MBTA zoning projects? I mean, I've worked on 40B development with no landscape architect involved. You get engineers, you sometimes you have landscape consultants. They're not qualified landscape architects.
Right.
Sometimes you have the developer saying, we're Pulte Homes. We've done 4,000 developments. We know what it's like to put a landscaping plan together. So I guess it's just a question for you as to whether you're already requiring that a certified architect or landscape architect or civil engineer prepare the plans. So it's going to be engineer and architect that prepares the plans. Just a question of whether you want a certified landscape architect mandating that for every landscaping plan.
For every site plan approval landscaping plan.
Right.
Yeah.
We did not do that for the age restricted that have been approved.
Okay.
It was a small new development. It wasn't a big one. So if something has to be changed because we're doing the MBTAs, or, development comes in that we have to address, we certainly could put that on then. I would think, if that's what the board wanted to do at that time for a larger development, but this is all.
Yeah, Fed says he's worked with other developers for large developments and never had a problem with the landscaping.
So let me just give you another alternative here, because I'm looking ahead with the benefit of knowing what other things we're going to be discussing. So one of the things that appears at the end of this file, we haven't gotten to it yet, is this concept of a waiver. It appears in the context of development standards. So important development standards that don't even really exist yet. But my suggestion was, and it hasn't been incorporated yet, but I've just been sitting here trying to draft some proposed language, is to just include a whole subsection. I'm going to call it subsection E, I think between B and E, that just is entitled waivers, that gives your planning board the authority to grant waivers from site plan approval requirements, understanding that not every project that requires site plan approval is going to be of the same ilk. You're going to have some that are simple ADUs. You're going to have others that are much more complicated MBTA zoning projects. And you may have one MBTA zoning project that's a 3-unit project and another one that's a 103-unit project or a 50-unit project. And there's going to be a big difference between the extent of your review of those two projects, right? So
Yeah.
I think giving yourself the authority to weigh in, this is not new in Townsend. We actually have it, one of the other 3 bylaws you're advancing, the age restricted development bylaw. One of the things that's in there is language that I crafted 2 years ago that grants you broader authority to grant waivers. Waivers are, I think, a trend these days in Massachusetts as an alternative to statutory variances, because nobody qualifies for a statutory variance. So if you can work waiver language into these bylaws, I think it makes sense. And I'm fairly confident we'll be comfortable with it, especially in the context of site plan approval, because it's meant to be a by right process anyway. So anything you do to give yourselves the discretion to be flexible to get to yes, the more supportive that the AG would be. So the other option here is, whether you want it or not, leave in the language concerning a certified landscape architect, and then give yourself the authority to waive it case by case.
Sounds good.
If you don't feel that a certified landscape architect is necessary, we could remove the line entirely.
Right. And if you don't feel it's ever necessary, it can just be removed.
Hearing that you didn't require one for your over 55 for sizable projects makes me think you might not need it for your multifamily overlay district.
Well, also just at planning, the discussion took place as what bushes were going to be there, what trees were going to be taken down. There was discussion at both that we just did as to what we're going to do for landscaping. We didn't require a drawing or an architect to do that, or certified landscaper, but they told us what they were going to do. And they marked them, they marked them themselves on the plan. So not part of the survey plan or the architecture, but they were marked. So I don't see why we have to have it there, but it's up to the board.
Yeah, I'm good for removing that.
Okay.
But I still like Adam's waiver thing. I think it has to go in. Because
Where?
at the end, wherever you were gonna put the waivers.
I
You
don't
know-
think we're there yet.
Oh,
Okay, fine.
Okay. All right, C, timeline, there was comments on this. Okay. That's back to, finance. Oh, I eliminated 5. Narrative, one of the submission requirements, narrative compliance with the applicable design standards of this article doesn't apply. So I eliminated that, item 5. Which it used to be, narrative compliance with the applicable.
We're
design
not
standards.
seeing 5.
Right, that's because it's not on this document. It was on a previous one and Adam recommended.
Oh,
this.
okay, fine.
Timeline. Shall file a decision with the town clerk. I added that. Notice that the expense,
So I had a question here about the board's intent regarding notice. So you'll see the way that this currently reads, starting at the bottom of page 2, or it's page 2, and bottom of page 1, top of page 2. It says notice of the time, place, and subject matter of the public hearing shall be given by the planning board at the expense of the applicant to the applicant and to all owners of land abutting the land being the subject of such application as appearing on the most recent tax list on file at the assessor's office. So what this says is you've got to give notice to the applicant and to owners of abutting properties. That's different than the standard that exists under state law for special permits, for variances, for administrative appeals, anything that's governed by Chapter 40A. That standard is parties in interest. And parties in interest is defined by state law much more broadly. It's abutters and abutters to abutters and abutters opposite public ways within 300 feet of the property boundary. So you draw a 300-foot radius from all boundaries of the subject property. And every abutter and every abutter to an abutter within 300 feet are entitled to notice. So that's broader than just immediate abutters. It also covers abutters who are separated by a public way, which is broader than just abutters. Because site plan review is a local process and is not governed by state law, you don't have to mirror the state law standard. A lot of communities choose to because it's simpler to just remember that we apply the same standard across the board. When you go get an abutters list from the assessor's office, the assessors know what kind of a list it is to prepare because it's the same list they prepare for special permits and variances. But you have flexibility. There are other laws that apply different standards. For example, Wetlands Protection Act has a 100-foot standard, not a 300-foot standard, and it's only immediate abutters. So it just depends. You're not bound by this, but I flagged it because I see this in a lot of communities. And if your intent here is to treat this like it's a special permit, you should eliminate the language that says, and to all owners of land abutting land being the subject of such application, and replace that to, and to all parties in interest as defined by Chapter 48, Section 11.
Which is the state law?
Yeah. Is that the state law? Is that Section 11 that defines parties in interest?
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess the substantive question is, should notification for these site plan reviews be the same as that for a special permit?
Or less.
Is there a reason to have it less?
Probably should be consistent. I mean, hearing it now.
I think we should be consistent too.
Okay.
Yeah.
And from the board, and because I don't know, Beth, we look at the state standard every time we send something out?
Yes, well, that is when a special permit is issued, but this is not a special permit. So that's the crux of it. This is the site plan approval. And as such, you have more flexibility in your administrative process.
But I think it's more confusing to the public if you're not consistent. They don't know the difference between a regular public hearing or site plan review than one that isn't. So why would we make that distinction? I mean, I'm asking the question if there's really purpose for that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, Adam, would you say other towns do use that process similar to site plan, or is this a little more relaxed administratively in terms of your reporting, your decision, the reporting and filing of the planning board approval, if I may?
So it's really a mix, Beth. It really is. I've got communities that have administrative site plan review where it's done by staff and it never goes before a board. I've got communities that have major and minor site plan review where major goes before the board and minor is done administratively. I have a lot of communities that don't require public hearings at all. So their planning board will perform all site plan reviews, but it won't be a public hearing process. It'll just be done at a public meeting. So it gets put on the agenda, the public can show up, but it's not a quote unquote hearing. And so notice doesn't go out to abutters or abutters to abutters. It just gets placed on an agenda that gets posted 48 hours in advance, and it's conducted like a regular meeting like we're having now. The applicant has to submit the same information. It's still just as rigorous of a review, but it doesn't entitle abutters and abutters to notice. And then I have other communities that do it that will mirror the state law and will hold a public hearing and will provide the same degree of notice. It's really a mix. It's across the spectrum.
Okay.
I don't see a reason.
So it's really up to the board. Yeah, it's really up to the board what you guys would like to do.
What's the pleasure of the board?
I couldn't hear you.
I don't see the reason in having a public hearing for an ADU.
Do you see a reason for having a public hearing for multifamily under the MBTA Communities Act?
That's a totally different.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's different.
But yeah, that's different.
It's different, but the way that this is structured now, we're creating a process that we're going to keep referring to. And so the only way that you can sort of differentiate within the process, because it gets really messy if you start creating a site plan process and then saying, sometimes we're going to have a public hearing, and sometimes we're going to have a public meeting. Unless you define two separate processes, and that's why I gave you the example of major and minor. A lot of communities will define major and minor. They will have an applicability section that determines what you qualify for. So usually it's criteria like if your project involves the alteration of less than 1,000 square feet, it's minor. If the alteration is more than 1,000 square feet of floor area, it's if you're altering in a way that creates or reduces more than 5 parking spots, it's major. If it's less than 5 parking spots, it's minor. Sometimes there'll be certain projects like ADUs will always fall into minor, MBTA will always fall into major. But that's a very different. That's a more complicated bylaw than what we're working with here.
Okay. Let's just keep it simple.
We do have the option of defining different regulation, a different process in the different sections. We could put language about we could put more site plan review language in the ADU bylaw and have more site plan review language in the MFOD bylaw and leave this more generic.
You could. It just gets confusing for applicants because now they've got to look in 2 different places for procedural requirements for site plan review. What I would say is look at this, and this goes back to sort of where I started with the idea of not referring to things that are not part of the ADUs, because you're going to have people saying, why are you talking about development standards that don't exist? I would say look at this ADU bylaw or the site plan review bylaw in the context of ADUs and define a process now for ADUs. And when we revisit this in 6 months for MBTA, if you then say, you know what, we need to be more rigorous with MBTA, well, at that point, we can rework this and create and refer to what we've already created as minor site plan review, and we can add a separate section called major and so we can make those changes at a future town meeting.
Okay.
You're not locked in. All you're doing now is creating a process for ADUs.
Okay.
And so the question is, do you want to simplify it even further? And I'm not putting my thumb in the scale here. I don't care one way or the other, but I think what I heard is, well, do we even need a public hearing for ADUs? Well, the way this is structured, it's requiring a public hearing. And all we started discussing was who gets notice. If we're now saying we don't even need a public hearing, well, that changes this. We can now say that the planning board shall conduct a public meeting within 65 days of the filing. And we're not referring to a public hearing anymore. We're eliminating all notice because nobody gets notice except through the agenda. But that's up to you as to whether you want to simplify it that much.
I'm good with simplifying it that much.
Sure.
Yeah, I think so too, only because we're not, it's by right.
Yeah.
It's really by right. So it doesn't really much matter what the abutters say, and we know that it's going to be a minor change no matter what it is. So that's what we're working with, ADUs, and it's by right. So let's just, a public meeting, it'll be posted. If everybody's okay with that.
The public
Yes.
change this word hearing to meeting within, and shall file a decision within the town clerk within 90 days of the notice. Notice of the time and place shall be given to
Yeah, so
the applicant.
it's complicated, right? So you don't want to, you can't create a 90-day time limit now from the close of the hearing because there's no
Oh.
hearing to close, right? So in communities that require this to occur at a public meeting, what they typically do is they set an outside deadline for the process to be completed. They recognize, because these are meant to be simple, that they should occur, that you should get your site plan approval within X number of days of the submittal of your application. Usually that's how it's timed. It's usually 120 days, although I've seen 180 days and I've seen 60 days. But 60 days is a tight time frame
Yeah,
to
yeah.
schedule a meeting, conduct a meeting,
Okay.
Yeah.
potentially continue it. So I don't know that I would recommend 60. I have a few towns that do, and it's stressful for everybody involved. Myself
I think 90, within the 90-day thing there that they have, decision with the town clerk within 90 days
Of the application?
Yeah, I've
of
received
the application.
Okay.
Beth, does that,
Yeah, I do a little concerned again from the homeowner who is constructing an ADU to have to potentially wait 90 days before they even go to the
within.
building. Yeah, within, true. I'll get it done in 2 weeks, but yeah, I guess that makes sense. It would be on or before 90 days.
I mean, I think for the planning board perspective, we want it done as soon as possible for the person.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're not going to dilly-dally on it unless they don't have something that they need. So
Yeah.
rather than asking for something rather than going 120 or 60, which may be just a little tight,
Yeah.
it just doesn't, I think that within 90 days, you don't know if you're in a holiday season, you don't know if people are out of work, you don't know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
if we get it within 60 days to them, that we haven't 90 days, but if we get it to them in 60, you look like a hero.
Yeah. Exactly. Yes, can I
It's
just ask a
simple.
question? Just a procedural question. If an application comes in, I guess if you drop the public hearing part, an application comes in and it's complete by our standards, but the board wants additional information. If you're not in a public hearing, you no longer are able to do that. So I don't know if that's a concern at all.
Why wouldn't you?
What do you mean?
Be able to do that, Beth?
Well, you're not able to continue the public. Well, I guess you can
There's no
continue
hearing.
the meeting.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's the thing. In a public hearing, there's a lot of continuation for more information. Let's say you didn't get what you needed in the application to make your decision. If it's just a public meeting, you just basically make the request and they can either, I guess, similar to a public hearing, but I don't know.
It's no.
It is. If the board
it's no
really
different.
wants to have something, then they just give them the next meeting date. This is what we need, and we won't hold it up.
Okay.
Right.
I didn't know if it worked.
It's actually less onerous. So the idea of continuing the hearing, you're
Yeah.
obligated to announce the continuance because you have
Yeah.
members of the public who might attend, and you've got to
Mhm.
tell them when you're reconvening. So that's why, in the context of a public hearing, you have this requirement of announcing the continuance and voting the continuance. With a public meeting, you don't have that, but the
Okay.
process is the same in terms of what you can request. You just say, "Come to our next meeting,"
Excellent.
and bring the fall. So
That's
yeah.
great. Thank you. Awesome.
Somebody doesn't, if
Thank
we
you, Ben. request
request it and they say, nah, I'm not gonna do that. And then it just runs out to 90 days, we just make a decision, or because it's by right, it's just kind of
No, you certainly make a decision, but this is sort of the risk whenever you give yourself a time frame. And frankly, this is a risk even with a public hearing, because you could have a public hearing process and someone says, we're not going to give you the information you asked for. And so whenever a board is asked for info and has refused that information and then looks to me for guidance, okay, council, what do we do? The answer is, well, you can deny it for lack of information. Now, if it's a special permit, you have a strong argument when you get to court, because special permits are discretionary. The board always enters the courtroom with an upper hand because the courts tend to defer to the special permit granting authority. And if you say, we asked for info, we didn't get it, we couldn't make an informed decision, you probably win. Site plan approval is a little different, because site plan approval is a non-discretionary process. And the case law says, unless there is the language of the cases, unless there is a complication with the project that is so intractable that there can be no reasonable conditioning of the project to allow it to proceed, then you lose.
Yeah,
And
issue your site plan approval with conditions, and you can put all kinds of conditions on there. And say you're questioning something about some guy's retaining wall, and he said, give me some more information about how that's being built so we can make sure it's stable enough. And he says no. So you issue your approval condition, and one of the conditions would be that the retaining wall shall be built to this standard, this standard, this standard, and this standard. So, very, very rigorous stuff, that guy can't get that. And now he can by right build his ADU, but only if he builds a retaining wall to this and this and this and this standard as put in your conditions.
There are some extreme instances where you have a sizable MBTA project and you determine we need to know the traffic conditions in the area. So you ask for a traffic assessment, then they say no. And you say, okay, we're not asking for a full study at 15 grand. We're asking for an assessment. It's going to cost you a couple $1,000s for your multi-million-dollar project. And they say no. And you say, well, how do we condition this on there being, the traffic not being a problem? It's either going to be a problem or it's not going to be a problem. You can't really condition it the way you can condition a retaining wall. That may be a circumstance where you take the unusual step of denying site plan approval. What likely happens in that case is that gets appealed. We end up in court. The judge certainly is going to look me in the face and say, you really can't deny site plan approval. And I'm going to say, well, that they've got to work with us and give us the basic information we need to make an informed decision. And the likelihood is that case gets remanded with some instruction to the applicant to provide the information that's needed. Minimally, the applicant has to spend a lot of time and a lot of money, waste a lot of time in court, and most applicants are not going to roll the dice. They're going to say, okay, we'll work with you. We'll give you the $2,000 study instead of spending, $52,000 in our attorney to litigate this case for the next 6 to 8 months.
Gotcha. And in terms of an ADU, what are we really talking about?
Yeah, for an ADU, it's not an issue, I think.
So in terms of the language on here, within 90 days of the receipt of the application period, and now is that the end of my paragraph?
I think the sentence is, the planning board may, when appropriate, seek the input of other municipal boards and officials. I think that sentence can stay in.
Okay, but then the red goes away too?
It does.
And then the red goes away too?
Because we have already set a 90-day limit, so.
We're keeping this one, and then we're crossing out all that. This board is an excellent editor. All right. D. Okay. I have this written up here in generic language. Site plan approval for uses requiring review under this section shall be granted upon determination by the planning board that the following conditions have been satisfied. Okay, that's how I handled that problem. This is really going to become easier with this becoming the minor site plan review section. Remember, folks, when we were talking about, I'm also going to be working for this board, getting rid of their site plan review special permit and converting it into a normal site plan review section and going through the entire bylaw and finding all the references to that. Mm-hmm. We can make, how this is for our site plan review here is now 42.1. We're going to turn your chapter 42, your site plan review special permit, into your major site plan approval section, and that's what the multifamily overlay district is going to refer to. And now this will be your minor site plan review section. So when I come back with the MBTA bylaw and your site plan review amendments for that site plan review stuff, it will go in that. We'll do those together.
Okay.
Also, going back, I've gone back to the ADU bylaw, and Section D, which used to say you're going to hold a public hearing, is now just saying you're going to hold a public meeting in accordance with these procedures. Have a chance here to meeting there. All right, so D, site plan approval. Okay, and you had a comment on 2 here. The project, it used to read, the project described meets the development standards set forth on such projects unless any requirements have been waived by the planning board. Yeah, I wasn't sure what we wanted to do with that.
Would that be replaced by Adam's potentially draft waiver language?
So I think that my issue with D2 was simply that it says the project as described in the application meets the development standards set forth for such projects in this bylaw. What are the development standards set forth in this bylaw? You just saw the bylaws, 2 pages. There's no development standards. There's applicability, there's submission requirements.
So this bylaw refers to the zoning bylaw as a whole. It would mean the development standards in the for ADUs. It would mean like section C of the ADU bylaw. And then in the multifamily overlay district, there'll be development standards there.
Okay, so for the development standards for the use.
Development standards set forth by such projects. Yeah,
Okay.
Such projects. So you think we need to make that more clear?
Yeah, obviously I was confused by it, so maybe nobody else was, but I was just saying, what development standards are we talking about? But
okay,
Well, it does say set forth projects in this bylaw. Is that, and as you mentioned, there are no standards set in the bylaw.
yeah, it's
This
confusing.
bylaw.
Yeah, it's confusing because of the way that the term bylaw is often used in bylaws. So very often the phrase "this bylaw" within a new self-contained section of a bylaw refers to that section of the bylaw. Other times it's used and it refers to the zoning bylaw as a whole. And so I read it as saying this bylaw that I'm looking at here, the site plan review bylaw, as opposed to the zoning bylaw as a whole.
So set forth for such projects in Townsend's zoning bylaw?
Yeah, or just the zoning bylaw, just more generically, I guess, is fine. And I guess I would just be cautious. Maybe we say meets applicable standards for such projects, because the term development standards, I mean, very often in a bylaw you have environmental standards, you have site standards, you have development standards. And so I was just confused.
Change that to requirements, because section C here is requirements for an accessory development unit. Requirements for ADUs. So make this the project as described in the application meets the applicable requirements set forth for such projects in
this zoning bylaw.
But if it meets the standards, why do you need a waiver?
Yeah, and let's get rid of the waiver line. Now that we are.
But Adam, we were looking for language in reference to a waiver.
Right. So
in other words, yeah, depending on like the size of the scope of whatever it is we're doing, there should be some leeway, because they wouldn't all be the same.
Right. So what I've done, and you have no way of seeing this, I've just typed it up as we've been talking here, is I've added a new section. We're going to get to E in a minute, but I have a sense that E may go away. But I've just added a new section here after D. I've called it E, and I've called it waivers. And the language I chose, actually, I just cut and pasted more or less from what was in the age-restricted development bylaw, which I drafted 2 years ago for that bylaw. And what it says is, the planning board may, in its reasonable discretion, reduce, alter, or waive any or all of the foregoing site plan requirements upon demonstration by an applicant of just cause for such a reduction, alteration, or waiver, provided that the planning board also finds that the reduction, alteration, or waiver would advance the purpose of this section and further the public interest. So it's just a generic, on the one hand, it's a generic waiver clause, but it also provides some guidance. I mean, I always advise towns, communities to not have this generic language that says, and the board reserves the right to waive these requirements. Well, the courts hate that because the courts say, based upon what? Now you're giving the board the authority to zone on a whim based upon whether they like the applicant or right? So you need some defining standards that they're applying. So by saying consistency with the purpose of the section and furthering the public interest, then when you grant waivers, you can explain that we deem this to be consistent with the language of the section and we think it's in the public interest because it facilitates getting this project built.
And I believe we just did something like that too at planning.
You did.
So, and it's all about going through the process and talking about what is the best for the community in the end. So
are we leaving that last phrase unless any requirements have been waived?
No, I think we can strike that because we're going to have a whole self-contained waiver section.
I think what Adam just said will cover us with what our intent is.
Okay.
So is that the removal of E now?
Yes, E is one of those, the project phasing section doesn't make much sense for ADUs. We're going to want it for MFOD when that comes back in. We might as well take it out, not included in this, and then we'll add it when we need to add it.
Is the board good with that?
Yes.
So,
Yep.
so E becomes Adam's new waiver language.
Yes, I believe we're in agreement on that.
Okay. I think that finishes me off.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you very much, Mr. Doyle. And going on to our next out of the work session. Thank you, Adam, as well. You can stay, of course, as long as you want, but you can also I don't think there's anything else. Is there anything else on the agenda, Beth, that we may need Adam for? I don't see anything.
I'll send you these versions of the creating so you got them with the red lines. Okay.
Okay. So, see from abutting towns. Andrew, do you have any announcements from abutting towns?
Let me check the portal.
I think there were two things. I did not have them printed off.
Let's see.
And I also think we lost Beth.
No.
I'm still here. I just screen shared the
Okay.
agenda. Yeah.
Oh, I have that in front of me, but yes, it's so Andrew.
Yep. I'm going through the portal. There was an ANR submission to the planning board for Greenville Road. That's plans though. Let's see what else is there.
So with that A&R, that, if I may, is just officially going to be received by the board tonight. And it will be discussed at the January 13th meeting after staff review.
Okay, got it. All right, so I'm at 3.1. So this is a notice from the Zoning Board of Appeals from the town of Townsend. It's a notice of decision that a special permit under the town of zoning bylaws has been granted to 324 Main Street Partners LLC for revitalization of the existing infrastructure and continue the operation of a full-serve gas station with convenience store in a residential district in the Aquifer Protection District. Property is located at 324 Main Street.
Okay.
And there is the special permit. I won't read all of that.
I think we heard them. I think they
We
came
did.
before us.
They did.
Okay.
Let's see. There is the notice that the town charter has been amended. That is 15 pages. I will not plan to read that
You sure?
Right.
unless requested.
And it is, I don't know if it's up on the website yet, but, it is slated to be put on the website. It has been received by the town clerk. And
There is the
are
legal,
out there.
there is the legal notice from the planning board about our hearing on January 9th.
Okay.
Otherwise, I think that's it.
There's a memo for the annual town report 2024.
I see the memo. All right, let's see.
When is it due?
Let's see. Annual
Oh.
town reports should be submitted by Friday, January 31st.
Okay. Thank you.
Is that something, Lori, as chair that you do, or does the clerk
No,
do that?
Beth usually does it.
Even better.
And hopefully we'll have, everybody on the board will get to review it before it's submitted.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right.
So if somebody has some input, it hopefully we'll get it before it's been already sent.
And I don't know, Andrew, if you saw, there's the bulletin from the Attorney General regarding the amendment was approved for the accessory apartment amendment at annual town meeting 2024. I would recommend that the board read through the bulletin. The Attorney General. Yep.
In the correspondence folder, or
It is. It's under correspondence in the 3.2 MRPC and other agencies.
Oh, I see. I got you.
Yeah, I totally recommend everyone read that because it's very specific to what's going on with the state law and ADUs and why the amendments were allowed, but they're also pointing the board towards things that they strongly encourage the town to do regarding their amendments, to our new ADU bylaw, if you will. So there's information about the regulations that they're promulgating, and clarifying terms and things of that nature. So it's a very good write-up by the Attorney General for the planning board.
Okay.
Does Joe need to see this, or has he already seen this?
I don't know if Joe's seen that. I will assume he has, but I will send it.
MRPC.
Yeah, this did not. Well, no, I'm not. This wouldn't necessarily go to MRPC. This comes to the town and to town council. So I'll make a point of sending that to Joe right now, just so he knows. I'm pretty sure he would be interested in this too. All right.
So what are you referring to as far as received from Montechusett Regional Planning Commission and?
So there wasn't anything other than nothing received from MRPC that I put in here.
Okay.
So just the bulletin from the AG. And that was not received from MRPC. That was received from the Attorney General to the town.
Okay. All right. And then the rest is just announcements with the citizen planner.
Yep.
All winter workshops.
Mm-hmm.
And Source Library. So you'll have the public hearing then regarding these bylaws on January 9th, starting at 6:30.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then our next regular meeting will be January 13th.
Yes. So the 9th will be the public hearing. Yep. And that the 13th will be your next regular meeting. Then that will be the meeting you can discuss the A&R.
Okay. And also the finalization of the results of the public hearing on the warrant.
Yes, absolutely. Perfect.
Okay, so will we intend to have Adam at that meeting?
At the public hearing or at the meeting on the 13th?
The meeting on the 13th.
I'd probably be wise. Yeah, I would invite him to that for sure.
Okay, well, we'll see how it goes on the 9th, right? See how
True.
much.
Yeah, if nothing changes, then yeah.
Okay,
So I guess the biggest priority is to get the final draft, from my perspective, so that when the public is asking for that, I have something to give them.
okay. So January 13th, what is the other meeting date that we have in January? Is it the 27th?
The 27th, I would imagine. Let me double check. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
We have the 9th, 13th, and 27th.
Yes, I'm going to double check that.
Yeah, but the one on the 9th, if nobody shows up, it's going to be a quick meeting.
Right.
It
Exactly.
depends on who's going to tune in because it's a public hearing for that specific purpose.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Any other comments from the board?
2025.
Just Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Yeah.
Merry Christmas.
This is Happy New Year.
Hanukkah.
Thank you. Hope everybody has a great week, and it was nice to see you all. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn at
So moved.
8:23 p.m.
And I'll second it.
Okay, consensus? Anybody object? No objections.